So I got new lighting. I seem to look even paler than usual. Even though I can lower the brightness. This is really giving, the whole she's a vampire vibe, isn't it? I we just have to go with it. I mean, look, it's the same colour as my hand, okay? Before people say it's all makeup, I'm just I live in Scotland. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to my library. If you're new here, hello, my name is Chintzia, and if you're not new here and you're one of my lovely regulars, hi, how are you? I hope you're doing splendidly. Also, quick shout out, today's video is sponsored by a new sponsor, NordPass, more on them later. Anyway, whenever most of us think of Oedipus, we think of the wretched soul who killed his father, married his mother, and gouged his eyes out in shame, as we all would. Or we think of that strange man off Tinder many years ago who had photographs of his mother absolutely everywhere and insisted that you drink tea out of a mug with a photograph with his mother on it, and no other mug was allowed in your hand. No, just me. Quelle surprise. Oh well, we can't all be so lucky. However, most of us actually forget the less incestuous but equally as psychologically complex and mysterious story of Oedipus and the Sphinx, which happens before that. So the little scene takes place just after Oedipus is told by the Oracle of Delphi that he will kill his father and marry his mother. And naturally horrified, he flees Corinth and travels to the city of Thebes. On his way there, he meets Laius, his father, but he doesn't actually know that's his father, and he starts quarrelling with him and ultimately kills him. You'd think he'd be a bit more cautious about killing people, but there we go. So as he approaches Thebes, he meets the Sphinx, this ferocious beast with the head and bust of a woman and the body of a big cat, which is usually a lion. According to Hesiod, the Sphinx was the daughter of Orthus and Chimera, or Chimera. I've heard it said multiple times. I'm going to say Chimera, that sounds better to me, but it could be Chimera. Anyway, Orthus, according to Apollodorus, was the two-headed dog who guarded Geryon's cattle. Now, we've already met him in the second part of my 2-video series detailing the trials of Heracles, which you can watch up there somewhere. Now, Chimera, or Chimera, whichever you say, was a fire-breathing hybrid creature composed of different animals from parts of Lycia, which is in Asia Minor. Now, usually she's depicted as a lion, with the head of a goat sticking out the back of her slightly, and snake heads for tails. But to add complexity to the Sphinx's origin story, Apollodorus claims that her parents were actually Typhon and Echidna, who was the mother of all monsters. Typhon was the youngest son of the Titans Gaia, Earth, and Tartarus, who's the Netherworld, and was known as the deadliest monster in Greek mythology. He breathed fire, and he bore shoulders consisting of 100 snakeheads. Echidna was a half-woman and half-snake monster. Now, she was quite beautiful at the top, but fearsome, and she would eat the flesh of humans. So the Sphinx's origins can be either or. Anyway, let's go back to Oedipus. So Thebes had been put under siege, basically, by the Sphinx, who was forbidding anyone from passing her unless that they could answer her riddle correctly. And those who failed, which had been absolutely everyone until then, were killed, either by being eaten or thrown off a cliff. The riddle, Apollodorus claims, was given to the Sphinx by the Muses, and she was there outside of Thebes, he explains further, because Hera had been angry at the Thebans for not having punished the Theban prince Laius after he kidnapped and R-worded the divine hero Chrysippus. If you can hear little monsters in the background, my dogs are playing, and I don't want to disturb them, but they're playing and it's little tip-tapping on the floor, so apologies. Obviously, this is Greek mythology, nothing is, simple, and there's many versions of every myth, and another version of the myth places the Sphinx outside of Thebes because she was apparently sent by Ares to punish Cadmus for killing Ares' son, the dragon. And then another myth, some say, the Sphinx was actually one of the women who, together with the daughters of Cadmus, were thrown into madness, and this one metamorphosed into a monster. So the origins of the Sphinx, both birth and why she's outside of Thebes, vary greatly. However, she's out there with a wee little riddle. And the riddle, as many of us know, goes as follows. Which creature has one voice and yet becomes four-footed, two-footed, and three-footed? I'll give you some time to think of the answer if you don't know it already, but I think everyone does. Oedipus guesses correctly that it's human, or man, who starts off as a crawling infant on all fours, then as an adult on 2 feet, before finally an elderly person with a walking stick, hence 3 feet. Now, some maintain that there was actually a second riddle following the first, in which the Sphinx asked other travellers, including Oedipus, there are 2 sisters. One gives birth to the other, who in turn gives birth to the first. Who are they? The correct answer, Oedipus says, is day and night, because the 2 words for them in Greek language were both feminine, hence why they were sisters. So after he passes her riddles correctly, the Sphinx promptly kills herself by throwing herself off a cliff, according to Sophocles. And Oedipus is hailed as a hero and married off to his mother, Queen Jocasta, and has children with her. And then his tragedy unfolds. But you know what shouldn't be a tragedy? Someone hacking into your accounts because you didn't have NordPass, today's sponsor, protecting your passwords. If you are still storing your passwords on your phone, using the same passwords for multiple sites, or even still writing them down in the back of a notebook that you keep on your desk, then it's high time you start taking your cybersecurity more seriously, with the help of today's lovely sponsor, NordPass. Gone are the days of faffing around looking for your passwords. NordPass stores them all, your passwords, into one place, and it also logs into all of your favourite accounts without you ever needing to enter your details. You can store unlimited passwords which sync across all of your devices, so you don't need to go back and forth hunting down for just that one. Also, NordPass allows you to store important notes, such as house alarm system codes or Wi-Fi passwords, and it remembers and protects all of your credit card details and information for you. NordPass is more than a password manager. It's the essential cybersecurity tool that makes everyone's life easier and safer. It's a simple, easy to use and very secure password manager created by the cybersecurity experts who built NordVPN, the advanced online security and privacy app trusted by more than 14 million users worldwide. So, to support this channel and to get exclusive access to NordPass best offer, then go to nordpass.com/Lady of the Library or use the code Lady of the Library at the checkout to get an additional 1 month for free. Thank you NordPass for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back into the myths of the Sphinx. Aside from the Greek myth, most people also know the Sphinx from their magnificent presence in Egypt. The Great Sphinx of Giza is a giant 4,500-year-old limestone statue situated, predictably, near the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt. Measuring 240 feet, which is 73 metres long, and 66 feet or 20 metres high, the Great Sphinx is one of the world's largest monuments. It likely dates from the reign of King Khafre, or Khafre. Again, I've heard it pronounced different ways, so I'm going with Khafre, who reigned circa 2575 to circa 2465 BCE, and it depicts his face. Whilst most scholars date the Sphinx to the 4th dynasty, others actually date it a little bit further back, arguing that it was actually built by Khafre's older brother, Regedev, to commemorate their father, Khufu, because they think it looks more like Khufu than Khafre. Anyway, the Sphinx has evidently deteriorated over time, with its body suffering the most erosion. But most people famously know it for having lost its nose. And the most famous conspiracy theory as to how it lost its nose stars Napoleon Bonaparte, as popular rumours spread at the time and for centuries that the nose was broken off during one of the French military battles near Giza during the French campaign in Egypt in 1798. But this isn't true, as evidenced by the artwork by the Danish naval captain and explorer Frederick Louis Norden of the Sphinx, in which the statue was painted and drawn without a nose, and Frederick travelled through Egypt between 1736 and 1738, 60 years before Napoleon's campaign. So the nose was gone long before Napoleon was ever there, and it's more likely it eroded because it's a very vulnerable part of limestone exposed. Sphinxes can be found across the ancient world, from Greece to Egypt, Babylon, Persia, and East Asia. But it features most prevalently in ancient Egypt and Greece. If you were asked to draw a sphinx, you would most likely draw the Egyptian version of it, the human face with the pharaonic headdress and the lion's body. You may even draw it with a little false beard if you've ever seen the Sphinx of Memphis or Hatshepsut. Egyptian sphinxes have existed in mythology since at least 2575 BCE, as evidenced by the Great Sphinx of Giza, but it's likely existed long before that. That's just the oldest documentation of any kind that we have of the Sphinx in Egypt. The Sphinx in Egyptian mythology was a protector. It was built to guard the royalty, hence why it's found outside of royal burials or temple entrances. It had the power and the strength to fight off the evil enemies of Ra, the king of the gods, and the godly father of the pharaoh. Like other ancient statues, the Sphinx would have been polychromatic, and we've had evidence that the Great Sphinx of Giza would have been painted red with a yellow and blue headdress around it. The Sphinx in Greek mythology looks ever so slightly different. You see, the Greeks loved adding their own twist to things, and when they got hold of the Sphinx, they added the most ancient Greek mythological features: wings and a snake tail. They loved adding wings and snake tails to things. The Greeks made the benevolent, predominantly male Egyptian Sphinx a malevolent female in their mythology, and the name itself, Sphinx, is likely a corruption of the Egyptian name, which I'm going to try my best to pronounce. She spanked her. That sounded like I said, she spanked her. She spanked her. She spanked her. I tried so hard to find someone who pronounced it, and that's the only way I could hear it being said. I hope I did something slightly close, and certainly didn't say, she spanked her. That word is meant to mean living image, which means carved out of living rock, and it was classified as living because it was a continuous part of the stony body of the earth which it comes out of. The origin of the Sphinx is still a mystery, but we know something about it a little bit later on, in its new form, as it were. You see, thanks to the Great Sphinx of Giza, there is a little stone tablet called the Dream Stela between the paws of it. The stela was placed there around 1,000 years after the Sphinx had been originally built, when it had actually drifted into obscurity of the Old Kingdom. According to the stela, Prince Thutmose, son of Amenhotep II, fell asleep near the Sphinx and dreamt that the Sphinx revealed to him his name. The Sphinx called himself Hormaket, which means Horus of the horizon, and told the prince that he was displeased that his sculpture had fallen into disarray and had been forgotten. He promised the prince that should he help restore him and clear away the sand that was embodying him, he would help him become the pharaoh. The prince obliged and did in fact become the pharaoh, Thutmose IV. After that, statues, paintings and reliefs of the Sphinx re-emerged across the country and became a more prominent figure of the royalty and the power of the sun. The Sphinx actually still exists across Asia today. In Hindu mythology, it is known as, again, I really hope I pronounce this correctly, it is known as Purushamriga. I hope I said that correctly. And it takes the same protective role as it does in Egyptian mythology. It's often found in the entrance of Hindu temples, and it's actually still present in the daily rituals of Hinduism, as depicted on the lamps used during Sadasapakara. We can also see the Sphinx in Thailand and Myanmar, and they also have religious associations. In Myanmar, the sphinxes are known as Manusiha, and they adorn the four corners of the Buddhist stupas and decorate the bells of the pagodas. Now, interestingly enough, In 2015, a marble statue of a sphinx that was more than 1,000 years old was excavated in northern China. The sphinx had Western features and was discovered in a cemetery along with carvings and bronze, iron, and pottery. This very small cemetery had graves dating back to the Tang dynasty of 1618 to 907. And what shocked archaeologists was not only that it had a Western style of carving, it was marble, which was incredibly rare for northern China. And remember, the body of a sphinx is often that of a lion, but lions' prehistoric range didn't even include northern China, so this discovery revealed a lot about the influence of the Great Silk Road, which Ningxia was near. So as you can see, the Sphinx really evolved over time, across cultures and over several thousand years. Whilst we largely associate sphinxes with riddles, that's a Grecian invention of the Sphinx entirely. When the story of Oedipus was being transcribed, Egypt was no longer an independent empire with the ability to impose and perpetuate its own culture. But it was a satrapy under Persian rule, with further internal strife at the time. You see, during Persian rule, it was incredibly difficult to access hieroglyphs. So when Herodotus travelled to Egypt circa 454 BCE, he had difficulty finding anyone who could translate the, quote, sacred writings of the ancient Egyptians. Thus, a lot of Egyptian mythology was refashioned by the Greeks for their own purposes. So how about the Sphinx today in Egypt? As time passed on, the Great Sphinx became largely forgotten once again. By the 1800s, it was buried in sand up to its shoulders. A Genoese adventurer named Captain Giovanni Battista Caviglia attempted to dig out the statue with a team of 160 men, but they failed. Then, in the 19th and 20th centuries, more people attempted to clear the Sphinx of its sandy tomb. But it wasn't until the 1930s when Egyptian archaeologist Selim Hassan was able to finally free it. Ongoing restoration of the Sphinx has continued ever since, but it's continuing to deteriorate. In 2007, authorities learned that the local water table under the statue was rising due to sewage being dumped in a nearby canal, and the moisture spread through the porous limestone of the structure, causing the rock to crumble and break away in large flakes in some cases. And thus authorities installed pumps close to the Great Sphinx, diverting the groundwater and saving the relic from further destruction. But it's still very vulnerable, and it will likely only keep deteriorating, because how does one preserve limestone? It's not an easy task. But that's everything I have today on the Great Sphinx. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be doing some mini little shorts on some of the random characters I mentioned today, so if you're interested in little Greek creatures or monsters or names that you've heard of, even maybe random princes, please leave them down below. I'll do little shorts on them. If there's any other requests for anything else to cover, again, I'm always happy to listen. This was also a request from people, so I hope it filled that wee little Sphinx void. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. I also have a secondary channel which I'll be uploading on quite frequently. I have quite a few videos planned. But thank you so much again for NordPass for sponsoring today's video, and thank you to my lovely Patreons for making this channel exist, really. And I will see you soon for another video. I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives, so keep reading.